Welcome to Test Those Breasts podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Vaughn. I'm a retired teacher of 20 years and a recent breast cancer survivor. My life has been pretty nutso for over a year, and many of you most likely know just how overwhelming this diagnosis is, and the more I can help empower women, the better. I launched my podcast on June 11, 2023, which was the 1-year anniversary of my diagnosis, as a healing mechanism, and have made it my mission to help shorten the learning curve for future diagnosed breast cancer patients and their caregivers. I want you to know that you are not alone. I was told from the very beginning that being diagnosed with breast cancer opens us up to the sisterhood of all sisterhoods. But some people need that extra help and encouragement and all of the confusing and many times downright scary information they are being flooded with. I've been interviewing many survivors, caregivers, oncologists, surgeons, nurses, therapists, advocates, and more in order to provide much needed holistic guidance for your journey. Breast cancer is such an epidemic, so the more empowered we are, the better. Now let's listen to this next episode of Test Those Breasts. Hello, friends. Welcome back to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. And today I am honored to have my guest, Tara Ehlert, on my show. Tara's cancer journey began 9 years ago when she was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer at 30 years old. She had a mastectomy on her left breast, chemotherapy, and was given hormone blockers, thinking she was cancer-free. Fast forward to March of 2022, her cancer came back and had metastasized to her lymph nodes. This reoccurrence completely turned her world upside down. She quickly learned how important it was to be informed, educated, and most importantly, be her own advocate. Tara is a mother to 4 beautiful children, married to an amazing man, and truly enjoys her career as a medical billing payments specialist. I actually met Tara. We actually have never met in person, but our mutual friend, Natalie Stevenson from Cancer Community Clubhouse in Reno, Nevada, connected us because she saw this mutual understanding between the two of us that self-advocacy and education was, on breast cancer was super, super important. So welcome, Tara. I appreciate your being on the show, and I'm really thrilled that you're here to tell your story and have us just kind of give some really important information out to my audience. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Jamie. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Good. Well, I'm just really glad that you're part of the community who actually likes to help other people get through their diagnosis and help them understand things that you've learned, that in hindsight that you've learned, and things that have blown your mind, because I definitely have been through all of that. And that's, again, one of the reasons I started the podcast in the first place was, number one, as a healing mechanism for myself, which has absolutely been really good for, but also, and most importantly, is to help those other breast cancer patients out there. And a lot of the topics we talk about are not just about breast cancer, they're about any cancer and any kind of health issue that people have. But, of course, we had breast cancer, so that's really primarily what we refer to. So I would love for you to share your story about your breast cancer and what your experience was, as well as the reoccurrence part.
Okay. So I was diagnosed when I was 30 years old. I had actually found the lump myself. I was in the shower and I felt it while I was washing. And I was like, it felt like just a little marble sitting inside my breast. And I was like, that's not supposed to be there. So I felt totally healthy, no pain, nothing, just the lump. And got a biopsy. Of course, it was breast cancer. They threw me into treatment. I had my mastectomy first, and then had my port placement, and then started chemotherapy. And I did chemo for a year. I did the real heavy chemo that they call the Red Devil for about 6 months. And then the last 6 months was the lighter chemo. And then I was put on the hormone blockers. I was in New York at this time. And when I had finished up with treatment, I was in the middle of reconstruction as well, but I was in the process of moving back to Nevada. So before I left New York, my oncologist in New York told me, hey, when you get to Nevada, see about this shot, because back then, 9 years ago, this shot to stop your period was new. And he was like, see if you can talk to someone about possibly doing that. So I had all these plans to do that, to finish up my reconstruction. And I moved back here to Nevada and found an oncologist in the local area. He didn't feel that I needed the shot, told me to go ahead and come off of my hormone blockers. And I was being checked I think it was every 6 months I was getting blood work drawn. And then I kind of stopped doing that. I can't really say why. I think I was in between insurances. I was, marrying my husband. So we had joining insurance. And so I was going to get on his insurance. So I was kind of in flux with that. And then fast forward to March of last year, and I actually felt pain here, and I started to feel around. I felt a lump in there, and I was like, well, that's strange. So I went ahead and went to my primary care doctor. He told me, given my history, he's like, I'm going to go ahead and refer you to an oncologist at Renown, because I had stopped seeing the other oncologist that I had first started seeing when I moved back. And so I went and saw the oncologist at Renown, and he had me do a biopsy. He had a biopsy done of it, and it was recurrence. There's a tumor here. There's a tumor underneath my armpit, and there's also a tumor in my chest wall, all in lymph nodes. So now I'm on Ibrance. I am on the hormone blocker, and I am getting the shot that stops my period. And so I've been in treatment for about 1.5 years. All my tumors have shrunk tremendously. The medication seems to be working very well. I get PET scans about every 6 months. I'm stable right now. Last that I had spoken to him, I was stable. They're not shrinking anymore, but they're not getting any bigger. They're just kind of staying where they are. So,
okay. I'm assuming that your oncologist that you're seeing right now is somebody that you trust and is a better experience. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
OncoScore. What is that?
I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about it when I was first diagnosed. I honestly just learned about it maybe a few months ago from seeing it on Facebook, what it was.
Okay.
And
I've just never heard of it until you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So apparently it's supposed to be some kind of test that they do to see what your risk is for recurrence. I'm not totally sure how it works. I don't know how they do it, but there's like a certain percentage, and that tells you your risk of recurrence. And it's interesting that you've never heard of it either.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you ask? Your oncologist?
I'm assuming probably your oncologist.
Okay. I mean, that's just going to take us right into this importance of doing your own research. But first, I want to visit. You had an experience with your oncologist before that was not a good experience. It was some poor treatment. We never have to say names or anything like that. It's mostly to help patients understand why it's so important to use your intuition, listen to it, do your own education, and advocate for yourself. So can you share a little bit about your experience of what happened with your oncologist?
So when I had, like I said, first moved back to Nevada, I was seeing an oncologist, and he's in the Carson City area. And I was told, great place to go to, very highly recommended. And when I went to him, I had said my oncologist in New York was talking about this shot to stop my period. He looked at me like I was nuts. And he was like, well, I don't see why we would need to do that. And I was like, okay. Now, mind you, at this time, 4 years ago, I didn't have very much knowledge about, my particular cancer. My cancer is very hormone driven. And so when I think about it now, it's like, well, yeah, we would want to stop my period because my cancer feeds off of the hormones. But he was like, no, I don't see why. That's crazy. I've never even heard of that. And me trusting that he knows what he's talking about, I was like, okay, maybe it's a difference of opinion. Maybe my oncologist in New York was mistaken. I don't know. And then I was like, well, I'm still on the tamoxifen. And I was like, do I need to keep taking that? And I'm supposed to take it for 5 years. I think I still had a solid 2 years to go on it. And he told me, no, it's really not important for you to keep taking it. You can go ahead and stop. So he was just very dismissive. I got the feeling from him that he just, almost like he was annoyed with me. He just wanted me gone. And me and my husband had a talk about it after I had seen him. And I do tend to be sensitive. I'm a very sensitive person. So if someone comes off to me a certain way, I could take it wrong. And my husband was like, well, I think maybe he's just a very straightforward to the point type of doctor. And I was like, yeah, okay, maybe that's fair. But looking back now, I should have spoken up because everything about what he said felt wrong. And I was like, but I get afraid of, well, am I going to upset somebody? Am I stepping on toes? I'm the patient. I shouldn't, I don't know better than the doctor. But everything in my gut was telling me there's something wrong about this. It doesn't feel right. But I went ahead and did what he said. And do I know if that caused my recurrence? I don't know. A big part of me feels it definitely contributed to it. And telling my oncologist now what that oncologist did, he was like, yeah, he really shouldn't have done any of that. I mean, we're put on those hormone blockers for a certain amount of years for a reason. And for a doctor to say, oh, it's okay to come off of it 2 years early, it's just crazy. I went into this appointment thinking this guy was like the cream of the crop because of how highly they speak of the center. And honestly, I think it completely fucked me. It absolutely did. So,
given that information and in hindsight, because I have a lot of in hindsight situations myself, how important, Tara, is it for people to get a second opinion?
Oh my gosh. Oh, just so important. And so justified. Absolutely. I think so many of us, we talk ourselves out of it because we think the doctor knows all. And that's not always true. I think it's so important to get a second opinion because you really need to know your options too. Feeling like, oh, well, God, I'm going to upset somebody, or, this person's going to judge me. This doctor's going to think bad of me, or, no, none of that matters because it's all about you making sure that you're taking care of yourself. It gives a shit what other people think.
Yeah. I've interviewed quite a few people like surgeons and other doctors and so forth. And one of the things that I learned from a surgeon that I interviewed was this thing about shared decision making. And it's not a new term. It's been around since the 1980s. And it's just our medical system has been sort of set up like a patriarchal type system where this is your doctor, they know it all, and they diagnose you and tell you what your treatments are. You're going to do this, this, and this. And the patient's like, okay, doctor, thank you. And we all listen to the doctors, which is fine because, they're doctors in their own right and they know a lot and they have a lot of education, but it's really not that way anymore. It's really moving towards this whole shared decision making where the doctor and the patient talk about their options and they make decisions together. And this particular surgeon was really, really an advocate for having doctors actually tell their patients to go get a second opinion. Oh. So this particular surgeon, he talks to the patient and he talks to them about what their options are for surgery. And then he actually says, I would highly recommend getting a second opinion because what that does is it takes away a lot of anxiety from the patient. Even if the decision or what the other second opinion person says the same thing that the first opinion is, it really helps with the mindset of the patient going into the treatment. They're more compliant. They are more educated. They know they have these two opinions. So that particular doctor, it might have been more helpful for that oncologist to say, wow, I've never heard of that before. Let's look into that. Let's do a little research and find out a little more about that. Mm-hmm. That probably would have been a lot more helpful instead of saying, no, you don't need to do this and be annoyed with you. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. When I started really finding my voice and speaking up, I actually felt like a real ass. And sometimes in my heart, I felt like a real, or in my mind, I felt like it, but I knew that my intuition was right. And I was glad that I started really speaking up. Yeah. So good for you for knowing this now.
Yes.
So your experience with the new oncologist is very different. How so?
So much different. Well, first of all, my oncologist now is an actual breast cancer specialist. So I feel like that makes all the difference in the world. And I was lucky to be hooked up with him. Like, I didn't request him or anything. That's who they gave me. And he's extremely knowledgeable. And he has an incredible bedside manner, too, which is, I don't know, to me is rare to find, one that's really good at what he does, but is also cares about you. When I've had concerns and I need to speak to him, like when my scans come back, because, a lot of the times we get the results before they even do. And I'll call him, and within an hour, he's calling me back and letting me know what we're looking at. I've never had that. Usually I don't get a call back at all. It has to wait until I see him again. But he's been incredible as far as that. He reaches out to me as soon as I need him. And he addresses any concerns that I have. I can ask him any questions and he'll sit and talk with me about it. He knows what he's doing. He knows as far as this cancer, he's on top of it. He knows about the latest things. And when I'm leaving, he's like, well, are you doing okay? Make sure you get out there, enjoy life. Just, be as happy and as normal as you can possibly be. Like, it's a complete 180. He's totally different, completely different experience. And here I am a year and a half later, and we have the cancer under control. So.
Are you in the infusion center still and experiencing, and that's a Renown, is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I go to the infusion center. I just go once a month for my injection.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And how wonderful are they?
Oh my gosh. They are amazing.
I love the nurses there.
Mm-hmm. They are so sweet.
Yeah. I didn't go there for my chemo treatments. I was at Cancer Care Specialist, but I had to go into Renown Infusion quite often because I had developed this rare anemia from another tumor they found. I was in Renown Infusion a lot, like 3-4 times a week. Wow. And I was getting blood transfusions and everything. So I got to know the nurses there very, very well. I really, really love all of them there. It's very intimate and just such a different experience.
Yes.
So you had to do a lot of your own research on your particular diagnosis. Can you share what that has entailed and where some providers may have fallen short?
Yeah. So what really threw me with this recurrence was when I looked at the results on my chart, it said metastatic. And I was like, well, what does that mean? So I did what most of us do. I got on Google. Bad idea. Super, super bad idea. Because as soon as you put metastatic into a Google search bar.
Super bad.
Oh gosh. You're in the coffin. Dead. Done. You can imagine just being diagnosed with recurrence. I mean, I was a mess. It was terrible. And then to see that and type that into a search bar and they're basically telling me that it's done, over, I was freaked out, totally freaked out. And my doctor didn't really give me as many details as he should have. And that's where the gap is, I find, between patient and doctor, because he's doing what he needs to do. He's doing his job. He's keeping me alive and keeping the cancer under control. As far as the more detailed questions, I've come to learn I need to come up with those on my own and ask him. And when I do, he's more than happy to inform me. Kind of sucks that I have to make sure I'm armed with all these questions because some of it I feel like should just be a given. So that's super important, is making sure I have my questions on my phone ready to go. So I know, because a lot of times you get in there and you forget what you want to ask. So metastatic, I've come to learn, is like, I don't know if every medical office or hospital uses the term metastatic the way that Renown does, but they say metastatic because it has gone outside of my breast. There's a difference in where it's gone, right? So there's the distant metastasis and then there's local and regional. And I found all of this out through my own research. I got a book on Amazon. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's the Woman's Bible for Breast Cancer. I can't remember exactly, but it had a breakdown of those different types of metastasis. And mine is regional. So it is considered metastatic because it goes outside of my breast, but it's regional. It's right here in the just general area. And then they have metastatic stage 4, which is where it goes to the organs, bones, things like that. It's technically metastatic, but it's not stage 4. I'm right in between a 3 and a 4 is what my oncologist told me. So I didn't know any of that. I wasn't told any of that until I did the research on my own to figure out exactly what it was. So actually my situation wasn't as terrible as I thought it was, as Google had me believing it was. I had to really dig.
So number one piece of advice, don't Google stuff.
Yes.
When I first got breast cancer, I had one of my friends, I had a friend of mine tell me, I'm not going to give you a bunch of pieces of advice, but you'll get a lot of advice. But I am going to give you one piece of advice, at least one. Don't Google stuff.
Yeah.
She says, the only thing I want you to Google is to Google 3D nipple tattoos because it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But don't Google other stuff. Yeah, well, that could freak you out. I mean, when you type things like that in there. Yeah, so I just interviewed a breast cancer coach. When I got breast cancer, first of all, we find out it's the sisterhood of all sisterhoods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many people are out there to support us and who have been through the same or, similar situations. There are also some breast cancer coaches out there, which I find very fascinating. And of course, they are not all created equal. So you have to be real careful about who you are getting those services from. But I did interview one amazing coach. The episode has not released yet. It will be in the next couple of weeks. But she is in the medical field and has been on the other side with radiology and ultrasounds and working with surgeons and things like that. And her biggest thing is self-advocacy and helping patients break down what those records are saying. Because sometimes when we read things on those records, we don't know what it means. And we go Google, what does this mean? What does this mean? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly what happened to you. And her whole goal is to help people feel okay, like this is what it means. These are the differences. So to my audience, if you are newly diagnosed or you know somebody who is newly diagnosed, definitely have them listen to podcasts and things like that, but also reach out and, maybe find a breast cancer coach because those people are also non-biased, like they don't know you and we can get advice from friends. And there's a lot of unhelpful pieces of advice also, but reaching out to someone who is very focused on making sure you get through your journey with breast cancer, helping you break things down, helping you read your results to something, connecting you to surgeons, connecting you to other options, or at least helping you understand those options, which I just find very fascinating. And I wish I would have had one, but I tumbled through, did my own research and became my own self-advocate. I'm a big mouth anyway, so I put it out there on Facebook. I've been very, very open about my journey. And that's how I process and that's how I learn. So I know not everyone is like that, and that's totally okay. But it would be really good for anyone to have that kind of support so that they're not super freaked out and they're not Googling things all the time.
Yes.
So self-advocacy does seem to be a reoccurring theme for most of us dealing with our diagnosis. Can you share, how is it that we get people to start advocating for themselves and listen to their intuition? Because I heard you say something before when you were with this other oncologist. Your husband had a little bit of a different outlook on what this doctor was like and maybe why he was the way that he was. And I think that goes hand in hand with husbands and wives anyway. So like for me, I was listening to my intuition about my breast surgery. And I came home and told my husband, hey, I am looking into this other kind of surgery. I'll have to go out of town. And he was just mad at me, actually. He's like, you're going to dump your whole team here. You can't dump your whole team here. And I'm like, I'm not dumping my team here. I'm actually researching options for me. I don't want to have this kind of breast surgery. I would rather look into this kind of breast surgery. But our husbands have different perspectives.
Yeah.
But you had the intuition,
yes,
that this was not something that was good.
Yes.
How do we get other patients to listen to their intuition? Why is it important? Why is it important for us to Speak up, ask the question, no matter how dumb you think it is or whatever.
I think the best way to start doing that is you got to push through that fear. The fear of if you're wrong or you're going to be judged or you're going to upset your spouse, or if something in your gut is really telling you it's not right, that's for a reason. Just don't ignore that. Do not ignore that, because it's such a strong indicator for us. And as women, we always just shove that down because we're so afraid of what the outside world is going to think about how we're feeling. And I think it's a big deal for us to be validated. But I mean, I think just having that gut feeling is validation enough. If I had spoken up back then, God knows how much different my life would be now. I think it's so important. Your life literally depends on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, I've had people reach out to me and saying, wow, you advocated for yourself. You asked questions. You don't care what other people think. And in reality, in my mind, I was a little intimidated and insecure about a few things, but I still pushed through it and I still asked those questions. There was a time where they thought that I needed radiation because they thought that I was stage 3 breast cancer. And it turns out I wasn't stage 3. It had not made it to my lymph nodes. I did not need radiation. And I had to be the person to remind that doctor, no, I'm not stage 3. I don't need radiation.
Oh, wow.
And so just little things like that. I mean, it's a big thing actually, but I had to listen. You have got to listen, and also take someone with you. It can be your husband, making sure that you have specific questions written down before you go to all of your appointments so you don't forget to ask it. Yes. Because you will forget. And so if you have that notebook and you have the person who's going with you, always take someone with you. If your husband can't make it or wife can't make it, whatever, take someone with you so that you can have another set of ears listening to what the doctor is saying and noticing. Because like I would go in and I would ask questions and my husband would remind me that we needed to ask a question and he would sit there and take a bunch of notes. I wasn't taking notes at all.
Oh, wow.
He was the one that was taking the meticulous notes. Yeah. And so then I would take all of his notes. When we got home from the appointment, we would talk about it. Then I would take all of his notes and I would update the Caring Bridge that I had and the private Facebook group that I had. And then it would remind me of what we talked about in the appointment, because it is extremely overwhelming when you are the person who has been diagnosed.
Yes.
Really messes with your mind. And we need to, have that person there to support you. So I want to ask you, and I want to make sure that I don't forget to ask you, I want to ask you about finding support like your Cancer Community Clubhouse, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to talk to you about private social media groups that we joined. So when I first was looking at getting into support groups, I actually had one friend tell me she got onto some private groups on Facebook and she promptly got back out because some of the groups were super depressing to her and she could not handle it. She was just like, I can't. So that private Facebook group, whatever you find and join, you have to decide whether that's going to be good for your mental health. And if you find that it's playing a number on your mental health in a negative way, get out. Get out of there and find something else, because there is a lot of support out there. You just have to find the right groups to go into. And sure enough, I got into a couple of groups and I promptly got right back out. So you have some experience with private social media groups. What have you joined? What have you noticed? And how would you classify or characterize how would you characterize your experience with that?
Well, it's interesting because, I had the opposite experience of your friend. It's not that it was super depressing. It was very much like all positive and the rose colored glasses on and just, happy and ringing the bell and blah, blah, blah. And I'm all for that. Great. Wonderful. I'm happy for you. But there is a whole other side to it for some of us. I can't remember specifically what the name of the breast cancer group was. I'm no longer a part of it. I liked it at first. It seemed really good. And like it was a safe place for me to talk about anything that I was feeling as far as my cancer. I had gone on there and I voiced my frustrations with my experiences with a horrible oncologist and not getting the education that I needed as far as my recurrence, and the screening process, honestly, for those of us that have had cancer and how we're being screened regularly to make sure that we're catching it if it does come back. It was a post about my frustrations because, again, I felt like it was a safe place to do that. I had a huge response. Just within like 5 minutes, I had 20 or 30 comments of these women saying, yes, I feel the same way. And I was in the same boat. And no, I didn't get the education. And I wasn't talked to about recurrence. I was just, oh yeah, had chemo, surgery, out the door, you're fine. So many women with the same exact experience. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize like there's so many others out there that are just feeling the same as me. And then it was taken down. They took it down. Post was gone. And I was like, what happened? Why? I don't understand. Like it was getting a positive response. And I tried to reach out to the administration, whoever was running the page. There was like, I think 3 women. I tried asking all 3 of them what happened. Why was it taken down? And I couldn't get a straight answer from anybody as much as I tried. So I just left that group out.
Did you ever even hear back from them?
One of them said, I think she asked me if I said anything negative about the whole breast cancer awareness month and the pink, pink, pink. And I was like, no, there was nothing like that in my post. And then she just didn't say anything.
And was she the only one that responded?
Yes, she was the only one out of the 3. I only had one lady that responded. All 3 of them looked at my message, but she was the only one that responded.
Ah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those kinds of posts for me are appreciated. I really like to read posts of people are having experiences. So I'm on a breast surgery for New Orleans page, and I have people asking questions that I find very interesting, and so that we can all come together and tell about our own experience. And so those kinds of posts are very educational, and it brings to light the real realities of breast cancer and frustrations that people have. Yeah, those kinds of things I don't find to be negative. I find those to be very educational. So that would be very interesting. I would love to see what you posted. Do you have a screenshot of that?
I don't. That's the thing that bums me out.
Or is it just completely gone?
It's gone. I couldn't find it again because I wanted to save it. And yeah. So it was, but I did like, it's just confusing to me because so many women in the group were like responding so well to it, but it still got taken down.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Well, I'm sorry that happened. Yeah. Social media can be a really interesting beast. People take things wrong. And so sometimes you have to be real careful. And of course, what you think is really an amazing post, some people might take it wrong for whatever reason, but I would love to hear more about why that was taken down. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Cancer Community Clubhouse. How did you get connected with the Clubhouse, and what do you find helpful?
Well, so that was through, again, digging, like I mean deep into the internet that I was able to find that, because I was at a point where it was like, okay, I'm taken care of on a medical standpoint. What do I do with all these emotions? And I Googled support groups and I couldn't really find anything. It was through Metaviver that I actually found Cancer Community Clubhouse, and I was hooked up with Natalie from there. I was able to email her from there. She reached out to me and told me about the Clubhouse and, sent me the information. And it was really through a ton of digging, which is kind of sad. It was really hard for me to find out about them.
Yeah, it really is. It's, I never even had heard of them until probably sometime in the middle of my diagnosis, but I really didn't get connected to them until towards the end. And then I interviewed Natalie on my podcast, and that was an amazing episode. Mm-hmm. Metaviver, I've never heard of it, but I just pulled it up. What is that?
So I was looking into that because,
how did you find that?
Well, because, in my diagnosis, they said metastatic. So I was able to come across that. Metaviver was one thing that did pop up. I think it's It's more geared towards women that have metastatic breast cancer. They're pretty amazing. It's been a while since I've been on their page, but Natalie is connected with that page. She's on there. The information about Cancer Community Clubhouse is on there. They're a pretty amazing resource for women that are facing metastatic breast cancer.
Okay. Looks like a great website. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can put that in our show notes so that other people can go to that. You have some resources, one being Cancer Community Clubhouse. What else can you share with us, and how can people reach you?
So it's just amazing. It really is. It's been a lifesaver for me. It's just really what you need outside of having doctors. It's somewhere to go to put all your emotions and be around other people that know exactly what you're going through. And they do the crafting once a month, and there's coffee gatherings. And I actually went to a yoga and coffee thing not too long ago. That was super neat. And the person that ran the yoga class was actually a breast cancer survivor as well.
Tiffany Johnson.
Yes. I loved her. It was a very neat experience. So it's awesome. I've taken my kids with me before to the crafting Saturdays. They're very open and welcome and warm, and it's a good environment to be in. And if anyone wants to reach out to me about it, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I'm totally open to that.
Well, if you can put your social media handles in the contact information, I'll make sure that makes it onto the show notes. And also Cancer Community Clubhouse. Yeah, Tiffany Johnson and I actually have been supporting each other all through our breast cancer diagnosis. And I used to work with her husband, and that's how I originally met her. She is phenomenal, and I love what she's taken this journey and is being very helpful to other newly diagnosed patients, and very much involved in Cancer Community Clubhouse. You also have Moms on the Run. That is something we've had in our community for quite some time. How are you involved with that?
I had a breakfast with Natalie, and she was telling me about them. I had seen them. I follow them on social media. But beyond that, not very much. I wasn't sure what they were about. And then she explained to me that they help women that have female-specific cancers. And so I know that kind of limits it, but I think it's good for women to know about, because they help women who are having financial hardships. And I know for me, the first time I was diagnosed, I was in a position where my financial situation was awful, and I didn't have very much help. So something like Moms on the Run is huge, because they'll help you with your house payment, car payment. I think she said they'll even help with groceries and things like that, like utility bills. Wow. If I had that when I was first diagnosed, that would have been a huge weight lifted off of my shoulders. So they pay for things that are vital for us to have.
Yeah. Yes. And those donations come from the community. Last year on my birthday, that was my, how you can do those Facebook fundraisers for your birthday.
Yeah.
Moms on the Run was that one for me last year. This year, my fundraiser was for Cancer Community Clubhouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really like those donation things. So Moms on the Run. Yeah. And they actually paid for half of my wig that I never actually ended up wearing. I ended up just going bald, and I wore beanies and turbans. I just never ended up wearing my wig. So I have a brand spanking new wig that I need to find somebody to donate that to.
How neat.
So
that is cool.
And not a lot of people know about these resources. So sometimes when, you go into the oncologist and they hand you a big, huge packet, and you're like super overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I don't even think I read any of that packet. Yeah. And so, they do have nurse navigators. I know they have one at Renown where you can reach out and ask them questions, and that's very helpful. And I know they got a new one at Cancer Care Specialists. They got a new navigator, which is really great. And then we also have Nevada Cancer Coalition, and that is a really good resource as well.
Yes.
So it's just a matter of asking the right questions, looking in the right places to find those support groups. But Cancer Community Clubhouse is just, some people are like, I don't need that kind of support. I'm not a support group kind of person or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then they end up going and meeting the most amazing people. And my piece of advice to people is to find that community, because sometimes when we are hanging out with our friends or our family, they don't get it. They just don't get it.
Nope.
And so to have that community is so important for you to be able to connect to and talk to people, even if it's just to a couple of people, you find that connectedness. And so what major piece of advice as we wrap this episode up do you have for women who have been newly diagnosed with breast cancer?
My biggest piece of advice, first of all, it's okay. It's going to be okay, and you're going to be okay. Secondly, please speak up. Speak up. Let your voice be heard. Any questions, ask them. They're not stupid. No, none of them are. I think any question you have to ask is valid. I think the stupid thing to do, honestly, is to stay quiet. I think the emotional support is just as important as the medical treatment that you're getting. It goes hand in hand, because if you're not right here, it's going to affect your body. And I would really just say, try to stay away from that doom and gloom place, because it's a black hole. It'll suck you right in and you'll get stuck there. And it's not a healthy place to be. I was stuck there until I found Cancer Community Clubhouse and until I got myself into therapy. That's another thing I recommend, is going and talking to a therapist that deals with cancer patients.
Yeah, great advice. I was stuck there for a while before I started my chemo, and I was scared. I was scared of the place that I was in, and I knew that if I didn't get myself out of that place, it was not going to go over well at all. Mm-hmm. So I took the bull by the horns, if you will, reached out to a therapist on Facebook, and he lives in Australia. He's a 3-time cancer survivor.
Wow.
And the reason he's cancer-free today is because he finally figured out that he needed to be right up in his head and mentally, because he was only focusing on the physical treatment as far as chemo and all those things. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't enough. He needed to make sure that he was taking care of his emotional well-being. And so now he is a therapist for other patients and helping them. And he helped me tremendously. It was like this hand that reached down into the whole darkness hole that I was in and pulled me out of it.
Yeah.
I interviewed him too, and I told him so. I said, "You saved my life." Mm-hmm. And then I was able to move forward and get through the rest of it. Even though it's still an emotional, crazy tumble through it, I was able to do it with his help. And so that's very good advice, Tara. Thank you very much. So I will definitely put your social media handles in the show notes along with your email address.
Okay.
We will put Cancer Community Clubhouse and Moms on the Run. And I would also like to put the Metaviver in there as well, because I think that would be really helpful for other patients who hear that word metastatic and get some more education on that. So I just really appreciate your willingness to share your story and your thoughts on listening to your intuition and asking questions. Be bold, use your voice. Do you have anything else to say before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you, Jamie. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and giving me a place to have my voice be heard. I really wasn't sure where to put all of this. And then it's really through who you know. And thank God for Natalie for hooking me up with you, because it's huge. It was so important to me to get this out there, because when I originally tried, I was shut down. So what you're doing is huge. I feel like it's a lifesaver. It's a bridge for people to get over to that other side of knowledge and power. And there's so much power in being educated. I think what you're doing is incredible, and I'm just so thankful for you.
Well, thank you for saying so. And it's people like you that I have on the show that make it really amazing. And Natalie Stevenson is pretty rad. I really love her. She's got quite a story. And any of my audience, if you have not listened to the Natalie Stevenson episode, please do so. It is absolutely amazing. Anyway, Tara, thank you very much again. I appreciate your time, your expertise, your knowledge, and your just love for helping other people. To my audience, thank you for joining us on this episode of Test Those Breasts, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye for now. Friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I hope you got some great, much needed information that will help you with your journey. As always, I am open for guests to add value to my show, and I'm also open to being a guest on other podcasts where I can add value. So please reach out if you'd like to collaborate. My contact information is in the show notes. I rely on people like you to listen, rate, review, and share this podcast with your loved ones. So please enjoy my trailer and any other episodes. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm on Apple, Spotify, and other platforms. I look forward to sharing my next episode of Test Those Breasts.